My name is Glenda Propst, and today Becky Kavanagh and I are going to be talking to you about the hardest goodbye. But before we get started, I want to share with you a little bit about myself, and then Becky's going to give you a little bit back of information about herself so that you will understand the experience and expertise where we come from in trying to share this information with you today. So I live in St. Louis, Missouri, just south of St. Louis, Missouri, with my husband, Terry, and our golden doodle, Charlie Foxtrot, who's practically perfect in every way. And I'm also the creator and owner of the Nanny Transitions Workshop. I retired in 2015 after working 31 years in the nanny industry. I was a founding member of INA, and I have been coaching nannies through the grief of leaving a family since 1998. I continued coaching nannies through this transition, even in my retirement. Becky and I both have worked in leadership positions in the nanny industry for many years, and we both have long-term healthy relationships with our previous nanny families. What sets Becky and I apart is that we are the rare voice of experience. We are not here telling you what to do without having gone through what we are advising you with. We don't talk the talk, we have walked the walk, and we know how to navigate the hardest goodbye. So Becky, tell us a little bit about you.
Thanks, Glenda. It's a very similar story to Glenda's in that I was nannying for over 30 years. I have had a very long-term experience with a family. That was almost 23 years with them. So I saw them through a lot of transitions that come, but endings do end, and we have to work through that. Part of being part of INA leadership, something that Glenda alluded to, was really important because it exposed me to a lot of different types of nannies, a lot of nannies all over the country, and their experiences. And that really started my interest in being helpful to them throughout their nanny career. I have built a side business that I work with nannies who need help with things like resumes or portfolio interview, those kinds of things, because I think that sometimes is also vital. And working with Glenda in the rebuilding team and in nanny transitions and helping other nannies just feels like continuing to serve and give back, which I think is super important. This particular thing that we're going to talk about is probably one of the more challenging things for nannies to go through, but for parents to understand. And that's where we're coming from with it. I have worked in an agency working with both nannies and families as well. And during that time, families needed to hear some things about how this all works. How do we move from one nanny to another, or from needing a nanny to not needing a nanny? And so this is beautifully fits in, and Glenda's experience and background with all those nannies she's helped over the years is going to make a huge difference to you. I know you'll find this very helpful. Glenda.
Okay. Well, before I start, I want to say this. If you're firing a nanny for cause, this is a different situation. But if the job is ending because the children are going to school, or you're moving, or for some other reason, by all means, you need to have a plan. And, we're here because we want to help you make this a peaceful transition. We are here coming from a place of not judgment, but a place of love and compassion and support. Because we know from experience that this is uncomfortable and unfamiliar territory, especially for a parent, especially if you've never had a nanny before. So I'm going to share with you a little bit of my experience and what led me to doing this. And that is that when I left my first nanny family after 8 years, I was heartbroken. I thought that I was going to be with them forever. that life happened and it didn't work out that way. I looked for information and guidance. And what I discovered is that there's a lot of conflicting information out there. And most of the information that is out there about this transition is very clinical. It's very cut and dried. And when you're dealing with an emotional goodbye that involves your children, there's nothing cut and dried about it. And, one of the things, I didn't find anything that addressed my broken heart. I didn't find anything that addressed how I could process my emotions. And as I reached out to the people that I knew, and I knew a lot of people in the industry, and no one could really tell me positive advice or even tell me how to process all the emotions I was dealing with. I was grieving, and I thought there was something seriously wrong with me. I had to research grief. And in my research, what I discovered was that grief isn't only about death, it's also about the loss and connection of someone that's been important in your life. And I realized that if I was feeling this, there must be other nannies out there that felt the same way. And this is the thing that no one talked about. No one talked about it with parents, and no one talked about it with the nannies. And the thing that I found over and over when I researched this, trying to find support, was don't let the nanny have any contact with your children. Make sure that the nanny, it was all very clinical. There was no advice on how to transition or how to make it a peaceful transition or how to help your children through the transition. It was just like cut the cord and get on with it. And that is just not the reality. And so the information that we want to give you, we want to help you prepare for that day, and we want to help your child to be able help your child be able to prepare for that transition. Because one of the most important lessons that you're going to teach your child in this life is that life is a series of goodbyes. Everything is constantly changing in this world, and nothing stays the same. So if you can teach your child to say goodbye in a healthy way, it's a skill they will use their whole lifetime. If you teach your child about change and about closure and about how love remains, no matter what happens, love always remains, those things are going to help your child through this transition. And they're also going to help you through this transition with your child. Because you know your child best, but you need to understand that your child needs to have closure. Your child can adapt to the situation and your needs, but you need tools to help you through it. There are all kinds of reasons why nanny jobs end. And when a nanny leaves, sometimes you've only hired her for a short time. Or sometimes your job changes. Or maybe you got transferred. Or maybe the nanny decided to leave because she found a different job or she changed careers. It doesn't really matter why the job ends. What we want you to understand is that nanny jobs end. They end. Sometimes parents say to their nanny in a moment of euphoria, "Oh my gosh, we love you. We're going to keep you forever." But this is the reality of having a nanny. Nanny jobs do end. It's a huge responsibility to hire someone to come into your home and depend on someone to take care of your child. At the same time, they're depending on you to give them a living wage so they can make a living. And when the day comes that you have to have that hard conversation with your nanny about that her job is going to end, it's one of the hardest things that you're ever going to have to do, because it's a hard conversation. And those things are all normal. Everything that you feel about that conversation, that's a normal thing. And so as you start to think about that conversation, frequently, especially if you're a professional, especially if you're in the business world, you look at it from a business perspective. You think, oh, well, I'm just going to tell her and that's just going to be the end. And, she can get her stuff and that's the end of it. And so from a business perspective, yes, that's true. But when you're in a business situation, even though this is a professional relationship, the nanny employer child relationship is anything but a business transition. This is an emotional, complicated relationship. So your first instinct when you're in the business mode is to think, cut the cord and move on. But you have to think about your child, to think about what your child is going through. So now I want you to stop and I want you to think about this with me for a minute. I want you to go back to when you very first started looking for a nanny. Do you remember how frustrating it was? Do you remember how scared you were that you'd never find the right person? Did you worry about remember how you worried about having to go back to work and what you were going to do and how you were going to juggle everything? And then I want you to think about how you felt when you finally found your nanny and the relief that you felt. I want you to go back to that day. And once you go back to that day, I want you to think about how this person brought this person brought to your life and to your family, and how you became more than just employer-employee, how you became to depend on them, ask them for advice, and know you could count on them to show up in a crisis, to give you peace of mind, to be able to go to work and know that your children were in good hands. And then I want you to start planning for the transition from that place, not from the place of cut and run, but from the place of think about the beginning. Think about what that relationship has meant to you and hold on to that as you start to plan the transition. I'm going to turn this over to Becky now, and she's going to talk about this next conversation that you're going to have.
The perfect segue from what Glenda just said is that this plan, this conversation about how things end, starts on day one. It starts when you meet the person and you say, this is my nanny, this is who we're going to have, and you begin talking about all the aspects of the work agreement and every little detail. There needs to be inside of that work agreement a whole section about how we're going to end this. Not just how much time we're going to give to let people know, what notice we're going to have, or any of that. Really look at it in detail as to this is how we're going to do it. And then as you get closer to the point when you do make that transition, to constantly a state of conversation about it. Communication, communication, communication. It's the key to a successful nanny situation with your nanny, is to communicate. And this is true as things close out, no matter how it's happening. So transitions happen inside of a nanny job all the time. In fact, life is just full of transitions. Just think of all the ones that you've been through. But as your baby becomes more towards a toddler, moving into those preschool years, there's so many things to adjust and transition into. You and your nanny are talking about it. You're working together. You're a team. And then there's that place when you realize we need something different. Our nanny needs something different. Maybe she's making that decision. The same kind of conversation should be there. It should be there through all of it. But what makes it hard for most nannies, for sure, and a lot of families, is it is just so hard to talk about goodbye. There's just some things that are just difficult. But if you have been conversing about it, you've been looking at it, you've talked about transition, this is just one more. And you can make it easy. You can make it comfortable. You can come out of it feeling good, and so can your nanny, and particularly so can your children. So Going back into that work agreement, again, I want to talk a little bit about that. When you start out, you have some basic things, but now 6 months down the road, you want to look at it again. This is a good time to look at it again. What shifts and changes do we need to make? Another 6 months go by, the same kind of thing. It's a mistake not to go back to your work agreement and look at it often, because those transitions are there, and these are touch points. We're no longer in diapers. Now we're doing, we're going to play groups and things like that. How is that working? Make sure you touch on that in the work agreement. And then you're used to going back and having these conversations. It's just like a muscle that you're building of, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about this. When that time comes, or you give the note, when the notice is given, or when you give them notice, you've been already talking about things, and it's not horrible and terrible and feels icky, because otherwise it does feel icky. Now, in that agreement, there should be a section about how we end this. The length of the notice should be listed in there. And while some people think, well, 2 weeks is kind of the minimum, this is a job that's difficult to find a job, and it's difficult to find a nanny. So you may need more time built in there. You might say, well, we started out with 2 weeks, but now I realize, to find somebody just like this nanny, or a nanny that's right for us now, is going to take longer. So you maybe want to add more time onto that. We need to have 4 weeks notice, then you want to make sure that you give the nanny 4 weeks notice. It should be a reciprocal thing. It's not, oh, well, next week, goodbye. There's no transition there. There's no time to have an easy movement. Unless there's some reason that you need to end it right away, as Glenda said, there should be a gentle transition, not that pull the tape off and go. It's not that way. So you want to have that reciprocal and respectful length. As you're phasing the person out, how are you going to plan for that? What is going to be that method in which you move to this next state of being? It's not just about you and the nanny and this employer-employee kind of situation. You have your whole family that's involved in it, your pets, your children, the neighbors. I mean, there's a lot of emotional things going on. The nanny employer relationship is one of the most unique ones as far as employment is concerned. It's not just the nanny is loving your kids and that whole emotional thing. There's something that happens between the nanny and the family that's very emotional and personal. It's very personal. So you want to do this as gently and as clear as possible. And you want to have a plan of action. And you want to be able to include, how do I plan and prepare my children for this? Including your nanny in that whole process will make things smoother for them, for you. Your children will realize that they're going to be cared and loved regardless of what happens. But if you shut the door quickly and say that's the best way, you may be finding your children are struggling, and that's a problem that you've eliminate that kind of feeling. I think this is a good place to move into what Glenda wants to talk about, this plan of action.
Okay. Well, as you prepare for your nanny's exit strategy, you need to think about not only how you can make this easier for her, but also, and most importantly, how you can make this easier for your children. Your nanny has become an important part of your child's life. You've taught your children to respect your nanny, to listen to their nanny. You've included her in things in your family. So you can't fool yourself by saying, oh, my kid will just get over it, because this isn't that situation. You might want to pretend that it can be, but it's not. Your child has bonded with this nanny. I don't care if your nanny has only been there for 6 months. Your child bonds with this nanny. And, babies will bond a different way than a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, even a 6-year-old. But there is a bond there that is going to be severed. And you can't just cut it, because it's not fair to your child. I mean, the nanny isn't the parent, but when the nanny just doesn't show up, one of the things that I know is that, and Becky will tell you this as well, that children get so much of their security from knowing what's going to happen in their day, when their nanny's going to show up, when you're going to go to work, what time is breakfast, what time is lunch, what days do I go to school? Because children get security from knowing what's going to come next. And if you pull that rug out from under them without properly preparing them, you're going to set them up for a lifetime of bad relationships and not knowing how to say goodbye and not knowing how to grieve. And this is so, so important. It is what you're teaching your child in these moments is something they're going to carry with them the rest of their life. And you're either going to teach them an unhealthy way or you're going to teach them the healthy way. So don't give your child the thought that they're going to just be able to get over it, because they're not. You can't just rip off a Band-Aid and tell your child they're fine. You have to teach your child to own their own feelings. You have to teach your child that it's okay to feel sad, to feel it the way they do, to feel this loss. But you have to teach your child that life is always changing and that better days are going to come and that things are going to get easier. You can use examples, concrete examples that your child can understand. You can use the seasons, like summer when it's hot, fall when it starts to get cooler, and then winter comes, and then the snow falls, and then the snow goes, and then comes spring, and the flowers bloom, and then the flowers go away. But those are seasons, those are things that they can always count on to come again. Okay, the other thing you can do is you can remind your child of a time when, maybe you could remind them of a time whenever they fell and got hurt. Maybe they skinned their knee and it bled, and then you came home and you washed it and you put a Band-Aid on it. And it still hurt a little bit, but everything you did to take care of it got a little bit better. And then it healed, and then you took the Band-Aid off, and then it got all better, but then you could still see that little scar on your knee, and they can always look at that and they can always go, oh yeah, I remember that, because that's when I was running and I fell on the sidewalk. But you heal from those hurts. You get better from those hurts. And someday it's just a memory. You still remember it, but you might, but you get okay. And that's the important message that you want to teach your children is this is hard and this hurts, but it's going to be okay, because I'm going to be here to take care of you. I love you, and I'm going to be here to take care of you. And yes, it's sad that Nanny's leaving, but we're going to be okay, because, and remind your children, remind your children of their strengths. Remind them that they can do hard things. Remind them of other hard things that they've done. Don't ignore your child's attachment or pretend it isn't happening. They need to have their feelings validated to heal. You need to realize that your child might struggle with this, but you also need to realize that for a little while, this is going to be a big deal. If your children are older, they might need a little bit of extra time to get past it. But remember, through all of this, you're teaching your children the most important life lesson of all, because you're teaching them how to say goodbye. And you're teaching it, that's a skill they're going to use their whole life through. Ideally, you can help your nanny be part of this. When you have this initial conversation with your child, it's really your decision whether or not to include the nanny in it. But it's a really good idea because, as Becky said, you want to present a united front. Okay, you don't want to pretend like you were all together and now you're going to gang up on each other and everybody's going to go their separate ways. You want to reassure and make your children feel safe and loved, and make them understand they're going to continue to feel safe and loved. That even if the nanny isn't going to be with them daily, she's still important. She's still an important part of their lives. There's all kinds of different situations. Sometimes the nanny moves away and they don't get to have that continued relationship with her. But help your child understand the connection that they're going to have. And as you start to talk about the nanny's exit in the beginning, like way back in the beginning, because in a minute I'm going to talk about the timing of when you should tell your children. But when you first start talking about this, maybe let's say you're getting transferred and you've had a 4-month notice that you're going to get transferred and you're making all these plans. Don't have these conversations about the nanny leaving in front of your children, because they're not old enough to understand concepts like time. They don't understand a week, a month, a year, especially little children. So when you start to think about when you're going to tell them, first of all, don't say things in front of them that confuse them. And don't say things in front of them that they're going to question. Or the other thing is, that sometimes their children hear you having these conversations and they go to the nanny and say, did you know we're going to get a new house? Did you know you're not going with us? Don't do that. You've got to take all these things into consideration. When they're younger, babies are not going to remember a lot. The main thing that babies are going to remember is the love and nurturing and caring feeling that your nanny gave them, but that you continue to give them. But children really don't have great memories until they're closer to 3. So, if you don't give your younger children more than 2 weeks for this, because they don't even understand the concept of time. They might at that age might be able to understand one more sleep. But if you're going to give, as you give them this information, you might give them something visual so that they can look at it, so they can count it down. And with older children, they might need a little bit longer. They might need 3 weeks or 4 weeks, especially if the nanny's been there a while and she wants to do special activities with them. But for both age groups, if you give them a calendar so that, you can put things on the calendar. Oh, what are you going to do with your nanny? Put these things on the calendar so that they know, okay? And if their nanny's not coming back, that's one situation. Maybe their nanny is going to be able to come back and have play visits with them. And if that's the situation, they also need a calendar that shows them when nanny's coming back. Before she leaves, have her first visit on the calendar so that your child can look at the calendar and go, oh, my nanny is leaving on this day, but I'm going to see her again on this day. A visual will really help them, okay? So think about all these things as you're in this process. And remember, it is a process. It's not a cut and go, a cut and run. It is a process. And if you make it a process, this transition is going to be so much easier for all of you, especially your children. And now Becky's going to talk about what happens after the transition and beyond.
Thanks, Glenda. So many good points there that you had, and this goes right into that, is planning for when and how your nanny comes back to see you. A great one is babysitting. If they're still in the same area with you, if you haven't moved away, this is a perfect way to have them come in. They're babysitting for you. Obviously, you're going to pay them. They're working for you, but you're picking somebody you know well, who the children know well. They're excited to see each other. It's a special event kind of thing. So you're going to go off and do something else. She's going to be there. You can 100% trust her. And it's a wonderful way for them to reconnect. But maybe she wants to have a play date or some kind of special activity with them, or come over and just visit and chat. That's obviously not, that's her choice or your choice or the choices you make. So you don't pay for that. But lots of nannies like to do something where let's go for lunch or go to the park or do something special just to reconnect again. And those are wonderful. Again, put it on the calendar. Like Glenda said, that is a perfect way to say, oh, we're going to the park that day. We're going to have a picnic lunch or something that they can look forward to it. You should be talking about that with your nanny and making some kind of a plan so that children have those things to look forward to. At the same time, I think that you need to be preparing a letter of recommendation for your nanny and be prepared to be a reference for them. Unless there's some extenuating circumstance why that would not happen, that is the kindest and the most appropriate and professional way to manage that. And a letter of recommendation can be very easy. Sometimes families get kind of caught up in, what do I do? How do I say it? It's really like 3 paragraphs. That you're introducing who you are in your relationship to this individual. They were their nanny for X number of years or whatever. And then a second paragraph just explaining some of the qualities that they brought to the job, some explanations of or examples of fun things they did with the children or things that you found particularly wonderful about them. And then the last one is, how do I get a hold of you, as a reference. It's a very simple letter to make, and it'd be wonderful to have it so on that last day she can take it with her, or very shortly thereafter, so she has it right away. Or if you've given her plenty of time and she's looking while you're finishing up the job, then you have it ready to go. You can hand it to her. You also know that people will be calling you for a reference. So being prepared to answer their questions and have conversation with them, whether it's an agency that asks questions or whether it's another family, so that you can share with them, your feelings about the kind of nanny that she is. So those are things to be preparing for as well, and making that goes on. And then I think it's wonderful if you can let your nanny plan that last week with the children. Now you've made a lot of preparations, but let her put in, I'd love to do these things with the children this week. And that gives her a lot of, again, this emotional attachment thing. It gives her a lot of feeling of comfort that she's leaving on a high note and everyone is feeling good. And the kids have something to look forward to, something to enjoy with their nanny. So schedules and routines need to be observed, but wherever possible, let them do something special, maybe once a day for the whole week. So that last week just feels a little bit shiny, a little bit special, a little bit magical. And it's a lovely way to leave and to have the children feel special too. You may not be aware of how much you are going to miss your nanny, not just because of what she does, to make it easier for you in your life, which is part of the job, to be able to fill in some of those things that need to be done around the house, little errands, just little things. And you may be saying, oh man, I'm missing her. So I think you need to be prepared for that and be aware of that you may be missing her a lot when she goes. because sometimes families are surprised by that. Like, wow, I didn't think that was going to happen. You also want to be aware that these last week, the children, your nanny is a little bit fragile, a little bit emotional, and you may be feeling that way yourself. The kids may be feeling that way. So let's just show some grace to each other and just be gentle with one another. Don't expect it just to be, well, she's just going to be gone and it'll be fine and everything. You know, as we said, that kind of feeling of it's over. He doesn't feel that way. So treat everything gently. If your kids are upset about the whole thing, listen to what they're saying. Pay attention to how they're feeling. If your nanny is a little sad, the kids will understand that if you're also understanding it. It's a hard thing to say goodbye. It's a hard thing to say goodbye. It's great to do something as a point of appreciation for them. If you know your nanny has some special things they like to do, if there's a small gift you want to give them, that's lovely. I can tell you that if it's something the children are giving there, that really sings with her. If it's something they made, I mean, that's huge. And then leave with the children for them to give them a little bit of something of themselves. So they'll be working on things. And it's a nice time to exchange gifts. Sometimes people will have a meal together at the end. You can be whatever you want it to be, but I think you need to acknowledge it and have something. I know that if a child gave me something, I'm keeping it. Now, I have a lot of things that children have given me. I don't need them, but I can't give them away, even though I've said, just take a picture. We don't care about it anymore. Well, I'm sorry. I'm going to keep it. I don't need a Beauty and the Beast doll, but I have him, and I'm going to keep him. So those little things mean a lot. Think about that. If your children are really struggling, and some kids do, they feel deeply and they're struggling and they're missing their nanny, you want to be very observant of that, obviously supportive of that. But if they need more help than you can provide, there's nothing wrong with reaching out and getting some help for them. Sometimes they just need more counseling than you can give, and you should be fine being able to ask for that. You want to support them. So keep that in mind, because some children feel things very deeply and get very upset by things. So this could be a big deal for some children, especially if they've been there a long time. Like they're older kids, it's a real struggle. And then I want to move into, if you are getting a new nanny, how that can be managed, because that is another transition. So one nanny is leaving and then you have another nanny coming in. How can we blend that together comfortably forever? So you want to respect the boundaries that have happened. So I actually think that if the two nannies can meet and even do some overlap with each other, many people have found great success, helpful. They don't have to be best friends or anything like that. That's not what we're asking for. We're just asking for one nanny to say, this is how we do things, this is how they like things, and the other nanny being appreciative to know this is how we do things, this is how they like things, even though there'll be other transitions with them. You also want to have that new nanny understand that the continual relationship that the children have with the previous nanny is extremely important to you and to them. And then they need to know that. They just need to know so that they can also be supportive of that. It also gives a nanny coming into a job following another nanny a lot of security to see how beautifully you're managed this whole thing, because they know when it's their time, they're going to get that feeling as well. And then encourage that these new bonds with this new nanny you want to build strong bonds with them as well. So while it might be easy to say, well, nanny so-and-so used to do this, we need to also respect that this new nanny has her own methods and ways that are just as good, and everyone will get used to it, but we need to also be respectful. So it's hard you don't want to be comparing and contrasting people too much. You just say that was then, this is now, kind of thing, to make it move better. And you as the employer have the great position of making that happen. So your children understand that's what's happening. The nanny knows what's happening. You can drive that.
Sweet.
So I think that we've hit a lot of high notes, Glenda.
So are you finished with that part, Becky? Do you want me to go ahead?
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to say a few things before we close this out. The first thing I want to say is that nanny jobs end, but the relationships that were formed, they don't have to. You know, I have, and Becky also, we've worked with thousands of nannies over the last number of years. And, you know, I have cried so many tears with so many nannies over the years, over the hurt and the pain and the loss that they've gone through. And I want to share with you a little bit about what we tell them. And what we tell them is stay on the high road. Always stay on the high road. Go out on a high note. Don't be ugly. Don't be nasty. Don't burn your bridges, because I feel like that's so important. And the other thing that we talk about is that it's not the last day that's the most important when you're in a nanny job. It's all the days that came before, because those are the days you help to shape a life. And, you know, we have these kids for a season. But I'm telling you, we love them for a lifetime. And it never changes, family after family. For nannies, it never, ever gets easier. It never gets easier to leave. And never, but every time we go back into another family and we fall in love with them all over again, because that's what we do. That is what we do. And as you transition, you need to have a strategy that considers you and your children and your nanny. You know, resilience is built by experiencing hard things and learning how to work through them constructively. And we do our very best to teach nannies how to exit with grace and peace and love. But we all need to work on teaching our children about the hardest goodbye. It's all of our jobs. It's not just our jobs as the nanny, but it's your job as the parent. And you know, as your nanny has worked for you for however long, you've been a parenting team. And you need to be a parenting team all the way through the hardest goodbye. It's going to make your children stronger, more secure, safer, happier. And honestly, it's going to make you feel better about the parent that you are. And the nanny is going to feel better about the nanny that she is. Because the nanny industry is so diverse and crazy sometimes. And Becky and I have kind of made it our life's work to try to work to make the industry and the people in it the best that we possibly can. And this is our labor of love. to all you parents out there who hire nannies, who have to let nannies go, to just say a graceful goodbye on that hardest day. And we hope that you have found a lot of information here. We hope that you understand that we are on your side. We support you. We care about you. If you have questions, if you're going through this right now, we're happy to talk to you. You're welcome to reach out to us at the Rebuilding Team, BG, correct, Becky?
Yep.
Rebuilding Team BG at gmail.com. We're happy to talk to you. Happy to support you through that. But if you've watching this video and you've gotten to the end, we are grateful that you took the time to listen to what we have to say today, and we hope that you took it to heart. Thank you. Anything else to add, Becky?
No, I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.